The space race was well underway. Accessing the new frontier would likely determine which world superpower could claim hegemony in the next century. Scores of Soviet and American scientists, engineers, and planners were competing to develop new space exploration technology. Plans for spacecraft, stations, launch vehicles, and weapons were constantly drafted and shot down. Tonight I'll be giving a walkthrough of canceled programs and projects from across the space age. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, consider supporting the channel by either liking the video or checking out the links in the description. It was the middle of the 1960s. NASA was, understandably, excited for the future. Their program was extensively funded by the government at the behest of Kennedy and LBJ. Future Earth's orbit would be full of space stations that required constant replenishment. Logistics experts predicted that dozens of people and hundreds of tons of cargo would be launching every month. Rockets were expensive, but there was an alternative. The Space Shuttle was a reusable vehicle that could quickly go between Earth and orbit. U.S. corporations quickly jumped at the idea. Lockheed drew up the Starclipper, a large and elegant spacecraft that had a 60 by 22 foot cargo bay, a little bit larger than the 80 Space Shuttle. It was 186 feet long and covered by a V-shaped fuel tank that was discarded during launch. The Starclipper would deploy a pair of jet engines and wings after re-entry, allowing it to land like a conventional plane. The idea was well received, but NASA took it and picked another contractor to produce a reusable shuttle. There were concepts, like the SERV, that used other means to travel. The Chrysler Single-Stage Earth Orbital Reusable Vehicle, SERV for short, would take off and land vertically. It was propelled upwards by a single gigantic engine. It could carry a 50-ton payload, and a small parasite craft would be placed on the booster to transport astronauts. The SERV would be extremely noisy when it descended, as 40 jet engines were positioned to cushion it. NASA was disinterested in SERV, and development ended in 1971. The 1970s were an unfortunate decade for NASA's colonizing ambitions. Budget cuts hamstrung their lofty goals, and the space program had a fraction of its former funds. The space station project was delayed, meaning that there wouldn't be a destination for any interstellar craft. Future shuttles would have to be mini space stations for scientists and astronauts conducting research. This marked the development of the Phase B Prime shuttle, a cheaper design that would efficiently exit the atmosphere then glide down to Earth at the end of a tour. Gigantic boosters would propel the spaceplanes upwards to release payloads of commercial satellites. Jet engines on the booster and craft would allow both components to safely descend to Earth to be refueled. The project worked closely with the Air Force. Military planners aimed to make every third mission a spy satellite launch. Unfortunately for NASA, the Pentagon had their own agenda for the shuttle program. The Phase B plane would have a 40 by 12 foot bay, large enough to hold either a commercial or military satellite. The DoD, for reasons that still remain classified, wanted a substantially larger 60 by 15 foot bay. These plans fell through, but a handful of military shuttle flights took off from NASA launch sites. There's a standout from the Phase B era. It started from a simple request from the mission planners. They wanted an orbiter that was as short as possible while maintaining the cargo space goal. The cargo bay was shifted sideways, shortening the craft to look something like this. The result was the Rockwell Breadbox, which is easily the strangest shuttle design here. The next craft has an extensive backstory. This wouldn't be a video about the space race without the mention of Nazi superweapons. It was the mid-1930s, and Germany was under the dictatorship of the Third Reich. Dr. Eugen Sanger, an aerospace engineer, was tasked with creating a new weapon capable of reaching orbit to hit American cities from bases in Europe. Silverbird was the result. Silverbird would soar into the atmosphere until it hit its maximum speed of over 13,000 miles per hour. The manned craft would skip across the air to slow down to the point where it could descend and land, presumably in Japanese-controlled territory. The project never reached fruition. Sanger's concept was picked up by the US post-war to create the X20 Dyna-Soar, a sleek rocket bomber that would use the same system to skip across the atmosphere. It would break orbit using an attached booster and would fall back towards Earth to accomplish its mission. The Dyna-Soar had ski-like landing skids to account for the extreme heat of re-entry and was reusable. Variants for reconnaissance, resupply, and orbital bombardment were drafted. 7 astronauts were picked for the secret program, but it was shut down. Some of the figures who were directly involved with the project claimed that the Dyna-Soar could have launched as soon as 1965, changing the Cold War. They bemoaned the naming choice, with many claiming that the funding from Congress would have been far easier to get if the X20 had a more serious nickname. The Soviets were working on their own spaceplanes in the 1960s. The Spiral was an orbital fighter that would be capable of maneuvering to attack enemies or bombard ground targets. It would be used for spy missions, bombing, and the interception of craft like the Dyna-Soar. The Spiral featured an insulated cockpit that functioned as an escape capsule. It would allow the pilot to be rescued at all stages of flight, and featured a nav system, parachutes, and rockets. The spaceplane was publicly canceled, but, supposedly, the project continued in secret. The Russian government maintains that the Uragan never existed. Western intelligence believed otherwise. In 1978, sources within the USSR reported that the development of an even larger space interceptor was beginning. Multiple eyewitnesses described a combat spacecraft being launched in shadowy tests. 9 Soviet cosmonauts were picked to pilot a mysterious craft in the mid-1980s, and DoD concept artists drafted sketches of what this spaceplane might look like. A source even claimed that new space-to-space missiles were on the wings of the Uragan, posing a threat to US shuttles. Uragan was shuttered for good in 1987. America's allies had their own plans for crewed spacecraft, with the British drawing theirs as early as 1946. World War II had ended, and the Allies were excited to finally acquire the V-2 rocket, the first ballistic missile. America got to the site first and hauled 330 railway cars worth of parts out. The material was sent to a distant outpost in New Mexico, marking the start of the American rocket program. The British were given a small piece of the V-2 rocket cache. They immediately began work on their own ballistic missile program and test-fired their captured V-2s in late 1945. One researcher named H.E. Ross realized that, with some modification, a V-2 could take a person into space. In 1946, he designed the Megaroc, an advanced and heavily altered rocket made for a human occupant. It had a capsule with radios and scientific equipment and possessed manual controls. Britain was devastated by the war, and decided to focus its limited resources on the nuclear arms race. It's possible that the project would send a human into space in the early 1950s if it had been funded. This plane, in my opinion, is the coolest one on the list. The Centaur II began its development in Germany in 1985. Its first stage was a large air-breathing plane that cruised at Mach 4, over 3,000 miles per hour. The plane carried a parasite craft with a payload of passengers or cargo. It would jettison this smaller vehicle into orbit, then resume its supersonic flight to take its passengers to faraway destinations. The project was canceled in 1994 as costs mounted. America started to send V-2 rockets with cargo into orbit in 1946. One V-2 was equipped with a camera. It captured the first image taken from space. The view from 65 miles up captured land that extended from San Diego to Salt Lake City and San Antonio to Kansas City. It's a historical event that I'd never really heard about. Imagine being the first person to see what the camera had recorded. Space planes are one aspect of space travel. There's many other intriguing related projects, both canceled and ongoing. This part of the video will explore several proposed ideas and obscure stories. This concept has been a reoccurring discussion in military circles in the present day, but its history can be traced back to the Cold War. The USSR and USA were locked in a stalemate in the 1950s. The Soviets had the advantage, developing the first intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM, and launching Sputnik into space. The US caught up quickly, and Russia realized that once an ICBM was sent towards the US could detect it and send their own warheads towards their opponent. Mutually assured destruction seemed inevitable. Destroying US radars was an option, but 3 different design bureaus within the USSR all chased another option. The Fractional Orbital Bombardment System, FOBS, would send a weapon into orbit where it would quietly drift like a satellite. It would approach North America from a strange vector to maintain the element of surprise and drop a nuclear payload. After many mishaps, one of which resulted in debris landing on American soil, these missiles entered service in 1969. Unfortunately for the Soviets, the US was fully aware of the program and had developed nuclear-tipped anti-satellite missiles capable of taking out FOBs. Project Prometheus took place in the first half of the 2000s. The idea was to create the LOX, a nuclear-powered rocket allowing probes and manned missions to travel to distant corners of our solar system. LOX craft would enable 24-hour-long commuter flights to the moon and expeditions to collect evidence of life on Mars. Prometheus was canceled in 2005 due to budgetary issues. Memorabilia is another category rife with possibilities. There's a section on the Sea Sky website that covers patches that were made for now canceled missions. STS-41F was a shuttle mission bound to deploy comm satellites, but due to payload issues, the cargo was moved to another shuttle in 1984. STS-61F has this sick comet on their mission patch. The crew's objective was to monitor Halley's Comet as it made its visit to the solar system, an event that occurs every 75 years. The Challenger disaster occurred a few weeks before 61F took off, and they were grounded. STS-400 has my favorite design. It was 2009, and the shuttle Atlantis was going to service the Hubble telescope. In the event that Atlantis was damaged, STS-400 and their shuttle, the Endeavour, would launch to rescue them. Titan is a distant moon of Saturn that is about 40% of Earth's size. It's the only other planetary body in our solar system that hosts active rivers, lakes, and oceans, all of which are full of liquid natural gases. Titan's largest lake, Kraken Mare, is roughly the size of the Caspian Sea, featuring island chains and depths that extend down for around 1,000 feet. This project, the Titan submarine, is still in development. Titan's gravity is much lower than our own, and its seas are easier for a submarine to move through. If all goes well, the mission would take place within a couple decades. As we approach the end of this video, I'd like to cover some of the art of the space age. It's a great way to get an idea of the speculation about the new frontier. Ted Brown was born in LA in 1931. He went to the Art Center College of Design in his hometown and joined the Air Force after college. He was in for a couple of years and in 1962 began work as a graphic artist for the Douglas Aircraft Company. Douglas entered the space race, and Brown did art for several of their proposals, most notably the Ithacus Plan in 1966. Marine Corps General Wallace Greene drafted the idea for a Rocket Commando Battalion. The Ithacus was a launch vehicle capable of quickly delivering this battalion and their gear to anywhere in the world, hypothetically reducing the U.S.'s need to station infantry overseas. The rocket would disembark its passengers and return to a friendly coastal harbor, where a crawler would take it back to base. A smaller version, nicknamed the Ithacus Jr., was designed to launch from the decks of aircraft carriers. Ted Brown moved from job to job and was given more artistic freedom. He illustrated orbital lab concepts in the late 60s, and the space station and shuttles in action in the 80s. He retired in 2002 and passed away at the age of 86 in 2017. I'll now cover a couple of influential Soviet artists. Alexei Leonov was born in Listvayunska, a small village on the coast of Lake Baikal in Russia. He graduated from an Air Force school in 1955 and became a test pilot. He was picked up for the cosmonaut program and made history in 1965 as part of the Voskhod 2 mission when he became the first human to conduct a spacewalk. He experienced the insane beauty of the vast expanse, and his perception of his place in the universe was forever altered. Leonov's adventure wasn't without danger. His suit ballooned in the vacuum and was too large to enter the airlock. He bled out the excess air, risking the bends, and made it back inside. He drew this, Orbital Sunrise, after the event, which became the first piece of art made in space. Leonov became deeply involved in Soviet spacecraft design and advocated for many spaceflight initiatives. He was an accomplished artist outside of his other duties, creating over 200 pieces of art. I find the spacewalk ones the most captivating. Over the Black Sea is one of his most famous works, made in 1968. It effectively communicates the splendor of what Leonov saw, with this lone cosmonaut with his arm outstretched, drifting through emptiness. A lesser-known black and white sketch called The First Spacewalk caught my eye as well. It's from 1966, and a cosmonaut, presumably the artist, is in motion, drifting toward the viewer. You can't see the person's face, but the pose captures all of the emotion of someone calmly returning from an inexplicable experience. Leonov got to enjoy the grandeur of the cosmos, but he still had to follow procedure and use his wits to safely return to tell his story. Leonov's career intersects with Andrei Sokolov, an architect and painter. Sokolov was well known for his body of work. He drew accurate depictions of major events in the life of the USSR space program. These paintings depicted rockets in action and landers traversing colorful planetscapes. Sokolov met Leonov and the two became friends. They collaborated on some of Sokolov's space fantasy art, depicting a far-off future in which humanity is actively colonizing the stars. These artists' depictions suit the time period in which so many of these ideas lived and died. I think this video covers a decent portion of the space age. There's a few canceled military projects and concepts that assume that space travel would quickly become a part of everyday life. The hope presented by a new frontier and dread of future war permeate these technologies and the artists who chronicled them. I was fairly uninterested in space exploration going into this video. I've always been drawn to the ocean. It was difficult for me to understand the allure of a truly empty gulf. The background research and many stories involved with this topic have shifted my notions a little bit. There are other parts of our universe that interest me more, but it was cool to explore some insane projects. Alright, that is it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked what you observed or heard, consider leaving a like or check out the description and some of the other videos on the channel. I'll see you around. Take care and have a great night.